Most people know they want an inspection, but when it comes down to it, what should you expect? Stay tuned and I'll go over it.
You better get fired up.
Guys, good to see you. It's Friday finally, man. For all you 9 to 5 Monday through Friday workers, you've been looking forward to Friday. We finally got it, and man, it's a beautiful day. So hopefully you guys have some good weekend plans here. Today I want to talk about home inspections. They're one of the most critical parts of a transaction in real estate, both from the buyer standpoint and from the seller standpoint. So today I wanted to go over the different expectations and even the process of an inspection, right? So a home buyer is typically going to put an offer in, and on the typical Florida contract, although there's different contracts in Florida, it's line 261 that states how many days that buyer gets for an inspection contingency period, right? Whatever you put in there, that period of time basically gives the buyer any reason that they want to get out of the contract, right? And they would get their escrow deposit back. So there's really no risk to the buyer during that time. I guess if you want to say, hey, they got to put a deposit down, yeah, you got to have the money, you got to put the money down, but you're going to get the money back if you don't like the shade of the light bulbs, right? Yes, you can negotiate as a buyer. Yes, as a seller, you can say no to any negotiations or you can negotiate further. And yes, as a buyer, you can back out completely for something minor. You can back out because you find another house that you like better, right? Anything can be an excuse during that inspection period time. I bring that up to give a little bit of comfort to buyers, and I also tell it to sellers because sellers, I think a lot of times you get under contract and you're under false pretenses thinking, boom, we got this one locked up, we're good to go. And really, until you're through that inspection period, I wouldn't say a lot of deals fall apart, but I would say of the deals that do fall apart, the overwhelming majority are going to fall apart due to inspection. So that's the period where all listing agents are just kind of crossing their fingers, hoping and praying. And once you get through that period, boom, now we're looking at maybe 90-95% closing opportunity, which is what everybody wants, right? So typically the buyer, once that offer is accepted, is going to hire that inspector to come out and look at the property. Now, a lot of agents, myself included, have inspectors we love, we trust for whatever reason, and we should be able to tell you what it is that we love about our inspectors and why they would use them. But I'll tell you, typically, at least in this area, in Port St. Lucie, you're looking at anywhere from $300 to $500, maybe $600 for a typical inspection. If you're looking for a 4-point and wind mitigation added onto it, which are needed for insurance purposes, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, right? If you've got a pool you want inspected, it's generally going to be a little more expensive. If you want a WDO, which is a wood destroying organism report, that's going to be a little bit more. So there's different things you can get inspected. And generally speaking, the more the inspector's got to do, the more square footage you've got, the more it's going to run. The less they got to do, the less it's going to run, right? But typically, you're looking at $300 to $500 for the majority of inspections. So the buyer hires the inspector. Generally speaking, an inspector can get out in 2 to 5 days, right? If they're really booked out, 5 is what a lot of them are going to have as the far end. Some of them can get in there within 1 or 2 days, but it's pretty rare, even when the market was hot a couple years ago, that an inspector can't get in within 5 days. So this is just my pitch to sellers. A lot of times you're going to see 10 days, 12 days, 15 days on an inspection period. I think that's ludicrous, right? My job as a listing agent is to protect my sellers. And unless there's some vivid reason that I can understand on why you would need more than, say, 5 to 7 days on an inspection, really, I'm concerned as a listing agent. I'm concerned because we might have a newer agent who doesn't know what typical times are. That's concerning, right? We also might have an agent who isn't really strong at writing contracts that are alluring to a seller. When I'm a buyer's agent and I'm talking with my buyer, the whole discussion is, how do we get what you want, yet make this the sexiest contract we possibly can? What does that seller want? What can we add to it to dress it up and make it look good? And whatever it is we can do, we're going to do. If I can get an inspection done in 2 to 5 days, why would I put 10, 12, 15 days on the inspection period, right? So that's something to think about as a seller. Now, there's asterisks to everything I said. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I will tell you there are reasons I might accept that. But that for me is, I don't know if I'd say a red flag, but it's a pink flag, right? So it's hired, they come over. what's going to happen between when they're hired and when the inspector comes over? Well, they're generally speaking going to send you some paperwork, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, and it's going to tell you what the scope of work looks like, what they're going to get done, how long it's generally going to take, the things that they're going to cover. It's going to talk about how much it's going to cost you. If you haven't purchased a wind mid or a 4-point, they're probably going to try to sell you one. And for most people, if you're getting insurance, you're going to want to get one. And that's it, right? Some of them are going to have you sign a waiver just saying, this is exactly what we're giving you, no more, no less. Please sign here. That's all understandable. Most are also going to want payment before they're willing to do the job. The company I work with will do the job, but it's an electronic report, and they will not release or open up that report until payment is made, right? So a little bit of added flexibility, which is nice, but you're not going to get the info you want unless you pay for it, right? Makes sense. So now, on the day inspection, who should be there? Nobody has to be there. But in my opinion, the buyer is the number one person who should be at an inspection. And the reason is if you give a lot of buyers, maybe 70-80% of buyers, especially buyers who have not purchased in the past, an inspection report, it's going to be scary. Because even on a house, I love my house and we take care of our house, we update our house. But I'll tell you right now, you get an inspection report on my house, there's going to be 20, 30 issues. Just is what it is. New construction, I've had 5, 10, 15 issues pop up. It is what it is, right? And if you're a first-time home buyer or you just haven't purchased a lot and you're not used to what those reports look like, you could look at that and it could scare the bejesus out of you, right? So it's really important to be there with that inspector from a buyer's perspective if you can, because now he's going to walk you through some of the issues, right? So I'll give you a great example. I've had inspectors before come down and say, you've got a tile roof. There's maybe 4, 5, 6 tiles up there that are cracked. If you purchase an adhesive and you put it on yourself, it'll probably cost you 10, 20 bucks for the adhesive and you're good to go. And even if you don't fix it, you're probably going to be fine for several years, right? It's more of an aesthetic issue than anything. If you hire it out, maybe it'll cost you 152, 250, right? So either way, it's not overly scary. Now, if you don't have the inspector explaining that to you in person, when you read the report, it's going to sound like cracked tiles in roof suggest repairing by roofing professional. Well, now you're thinking, holy smokes, we got a roof leak. Look at these tiles are cracked. The thing's going to fall apart. It can create a lot of anxiety in a situation where anxiety isn't needed, right? So having the buyer there at the inspection, in my opinion, is just going to help the situation. You're also able, as a buyer at the inspection, to ask that inspector questions about how to remedy the problem, right? So that whole adhesive thing, that's not going to be added to most reports. But if you're in person with that inspector, they're going to discuss with you the different options you have, and they might even share some prices. They might even have cards for vendors who they know and trust that they would recommend getting the job done, right? So you're going to get a lot more value out of it as a buyer. As a buyer's agent, I think it's helpful to be there, right? Because if you're there and you see some of these issues, you can start to preemptively have the discussion with your buyer about fixing some of these things. What's the timeline going to look like? Is this going to work or not work? Is there something we need to negotiate? Are you going to negotiate actually getting the work done? Or are you going to negotiate a credit so you can get the work done later? Will whatever it is you're asking to be done work within the loan? Even if you're not asking it for it to get done, will your loan allow the loan to close with these different issues? These are all things that you can have a discussion with as a buyer's agent with your client at the time of inspection, right? Now, if you're a buyer and you can't be at the inspection, you're a buyer's agent, you can't be at the inspection, it's not the end of the world, right? You can still have a conversation with that inspector over the phone. He can give you the visual report. You can see everything. Buyer's agents, if you've sold a lot of property, you've got a lot of comfort in being able to look over one of those inspections. I can look over a typical inspection now in 3, 4, 5 minutes, and I know what the problems are likely going to be. I know my clients. I know what they're going to say. I know what the solutions are. You can go over those typical things, and it's pretty dang easy, right? So that's typically what you're going to see. Now, what are they going to go over? They go over a lot of different things. And guys, they have to go over certain minimal things to meet certain state standards, right? Oh, I got a question here from Carrie Phelps. Carrie, how you doing, by the way? How do you add the fancy info at the top and bottom of the screen? So this little system I'm using right here is called StreamYard. I absolutely love it for a slew of reasons, especially if you have guests on. But all of that stuff I make in Canva, and then I save it without a background, and then I can upload it here in banners or brands. So hopefully that helps you out there, Carrie. So anyway, what should you expect on an inspection? They're going to check all your appliances. They're going to check your washer and dryer. They're going to check the roof. If you've got a basement, which in Florida we don't, they're going to check the basement. They're going to do a test to make sure that your air conditioning is working. They're going to check your water heater. They're going to check for leaks. They're going to check all the pipes and tubing and everything else for your plumbing. They're going to check electrical. Oh, by the way, if you've got a light bulb out, not working, not plugged in, whatever, it's going to get a ding. If you've got a fan or light that operates on a remote, and you either put the remote in a drawer that they can't find, or you don't have a battery in that remote, you're going to get dinged, right? If you've got tile that is chipped, if you've got carpet that's fraying or pulling away from the edging of the walls there, if you've got weather stripping in your doors that is not keeping the elements outside and there's actual air, they can see through it, right? Those are typical things that you're going to see pop up. If you've got bushes, trees, shrubs, anything in Mother Nature touching the house, sometimes within 12 inches of the house, you're going to get a ding. If you've got gutters, but you don't have proper downspouts and I forget what those things are called, splash guards pulling the water away from the home, you're going to get a ding. If there's a sprinkler system, they're going to test that, right? So all of the major components of your home, the visually inspected components, are going to be looked at. I say visually because if you're thinking they're going to check inside the walls for, let's say, mold, they're not. If you think they're going to check inside the walls for termites, they're not. Now, there are ways to see termites without digging in walls, and there's ways to see mold without digging in walls. But could you have termites, mold, or other things inside the walls and we don't know about them? Absolutely. 99.9% of inspectors are not going to do those things with a typical inspection. That's called an intrusive inspection. You can do it. You'd have to negotiate it with a seller. A lot of sellers won't allow that. And it's not because necessarily they're trying to hide something. It's because you're going to have to cut into my walls to do that and repair it. And if you don't buy it, I'm dealing with that. I don't know if I want to do all that, right? So it's not typical. I've sold hundreds of homes. I've never seen, well, that's not true. I've never seen it happen in Florida. I have had it happen in Minnesota where we had a little bit more mold. You've got basements, it's more damp. If you see a ton of mold, the seller already knows, man, this person's probably going to want to rip into the walls to see how big of a deal it is. On that type of home, you really don't have a lot of options as a seller, right? At least if you want top dollar. But typically, those are the things that are going to get inspected. Now, you're going to get a report. A lot of inspectors give it to you same day. Some inspectors maybe take a day. And that report's either going to be a physical report or most likely now it's going to be a virtual report emailed to you. In that report, depending upon your inspector, you might get full colored photos, which are helpful. If it's an issue where full color photos aren't helpful, you might get a video depending on that inspector. A great example of where you'd need a video. Let's say you've got low water pressure, right? A photo probably isn't going to help a whole lot with low water pressure, but if I can see 5-10 seconds of that shower head or that spout or whatever it is, and I can see how slow it's coming out, I can see if I personally am concerned about that water pressure or not, right? It's incredibly helpful. They're going to give you the verbiage as to what the issue is. It's all numbered so you can have a discussion with the other party about what items you want addressed or not addressed. Super simple, right? So now you're going to have a discussion as a buyer with your buyer's agent, and you're going to talk about whether or not you're happy with all these different things. I'm going to tell you right now, if you are purchasing a home and it is a used home, right? It is not new construction. You're buying a used home. It's not going to be in perfect condition. Like I said, I love my home. We maintain our home. But right now, yes, I would fix some of the things before I sold, but you're still going to get a home that has 15, 20 issues on it, right? And some of those issues might be, we've got a cracked tile or two in our house. Am I going to get a guy out, rip up tile, put down new tile just for a small little hairline crack? No, I'm going to let that hit the inspection and I'm going to price it accordingly, right? And that is what it is. So those are the ways that we are going to work through these different things. It's just looking at the different issues, deciding what we're good with, what we're not good with. And if you're not good with it, most people ask for credits instead of repairs. But of course you can ask for either, right? Now you've got a decision. If you're asking, let's say you're asking for $1,000, seller can say yes and you move forward. Seller can say no. And then you've got a decision, take it or leave it. If you leave it, you'll get your escrow deposit back. Or there's further negotiation. Maybe they come back and say, we'll do $500, but we're not going to do $1,000. All of that is negotiable, and all of that can end any way you want, but you do have the ability to purchase the home no matter what. So if they say no to your $1,000, you're still in the driver's seat, the house is still yours. So that's generally speaking how that inspection period works. We got another question here. Christian Fitch, hey Joe, are you seeing seller offer concessions more frequently in today's market? If not, what strategies are you employing to negotiate in concessions for your buyers? What concessions are being given, accepted most often? So that's a phenomenal question. Concessions, just so everybody knows, is the seller giving up money to the buyer to cover, usually, but not always, their closing costs, right? And you could cover a portion of the closing costs. You can cover all the closing costs. It depends on the loan type. It depends upon what the seller's willing to do. It depends upon what the buyer's asking in negotiation. But am I seeing it more? Absolutely. 2-3 years ago, you could not get it. It was very rare because everybody was getting strong offers, multiple offers, 10, 20, 30 grand over. But yes, I am seeing it more now. How are we negotiating in? Well, if you absolutely have to have it and you absolutely love the home, most sellers will allow you to inflate the price and add them in. Now, there's a caveat to that, right? So let's say we got a $400,000 home and you've got 10 grand in closing costs. You can ask the seller for 10 grand and maybe they'll give it to you, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll give you 10 grand if you raise it up to 405 or 410 or whatever it is. At 410 minus the 10 grand in concessions, this isn't 100% true, but it's like 99.5% true. I'm getting all my money back anyway. Either way, I'm getting the $400,000. So what do I care? Well, you care for one reason. There's one challenge, and that challenge is the home going to appraise for 410? Maybe it'll appraise for 4, but it won't appraise for 410. That would be a challenge. In my opinion, and it depends on where you're at, in lower price points, I'm not as concerned. When I get into the $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 price points, a lot of those homes are having tougher times appraising right now. But I will also say you typically see people in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 range asking for closing costs. I don't see that as often at $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, right? So it's a little bit more rare in the higher price points. Now, if I had a $450,000 listing and when I listed it, I told them, hey guys, this is probably worth about $430,000. If you want to list it at $450,000, we can try it, but I want you to be aware, I believe it's worth $430,000 based on these comps. But now we get a buyer who just falls in love with it, right? Joe was wrong. Okay, great. That's cool. That happens. So they come in and they give you an offer on your $450,000 ask price for $450,000. My concern is the appraisal is going to come in low. And I'm going to tell my clients that. I'm going to tell my sellers that. But now the buyers are saying, hey, we're going to offer you $465,000, 15 grand over your $450,000, but we want that 15 grand back in closing costs. Now I'm becoming concerned because I already think we're 20 grand inflated and you're going to add another 15 to that. That's concerning, right? Now, can you, as a buyer, agree to cover a shortage in appraisal? Sure you can. So typically this doesn't work because somebody asking for concessions needs the concessions or they can't buy, right? But some people don't need the concessions. They want the concessions. They got the cash. They don't want to use the cash. They'd rather fund it, right? That's understandable. If you've got someone like that where they can cover it, but they want to inflate, let's just use that $450,000. They want to inflate it to $465,000 and get 15 grand back in closing costs. If you want to make that offer look sexier, you can say, but we will cover the first $15,000 in a short appraisal. Okay, great. So now if it appraises for $450,000, which was the asking price, we can just say, hey, we're going to knock the price down to $450,000 and I'm not going to ask for these closing costs, right, instead. So you can do some different things with that. Typically, I don't see a lot of that because most buyers asking for the closing costs need the closing costs, but it really depends. I also tell people who need closing costs, let's go look at homes that have been on for 30, 60, 90 days, right? It's going to be a little more challenging looking at a home that's been on for 5, 10 days because they're the good-looking girl at the ball, right? They've got all the guys excited about them. Well, it's the same thing with a new listing. Even if it's an overpriced listing, the seller's perception is we're the prettiest girl at the ball. We've got all these showings, all this excitement. There's no way I'm going to give up concessions or risk an appraisal coming in short. However, if you go look at homes that have been on for 30, 60, 90 days, again, are you promised this? No, but it's more typical that it'll happen with those timelines than it will in the first 5, 10, 15 days. Great question. I appreciate that, Christian. Guys, thank you so much for showing up today. I hope this was helpful and valuable for you. If you've got ideas for new videos in the future, or if you've got a question on inspections, feel free to put it in the comments and I will always get back to you. Have a phenomenal Friday and an even better weekend. Take care, guys.